Welcome back to YA Disability Chronicles, your passport to learning about disabilities all around the globe. This is your co-host Meg, and I'm so glad that you're here. This week in Disability 101, we will be discussing depression, one of the most prevalent disabilities worldwide, and one that is often overlooked or written off. Let's go! In our very first episode, we dropped you into the deep end with our discussion of bipolar, as your other co-host, Hannah, interviewed me about my experiences as a way of y'all getting to know us. This week, we are taking a step back to explore some more common mental health diagnoses for context. If you haven't, I highly recommend listening back for some hard facts and some great laughs. This week, you're here with just me for a Meg-isode. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Hannah and I have had some scheduling issues, and we have both been dealing with physical disability flare-ups lately, but we want to keep the content flowing for you. It can be a little bit difficult to coordinate when you have a 16-hour time difference, but most of the time we manage. It is a rare perk of disability-related insomnia that you get to make friends in different time zones. Hannah and I originally met on Blue Sky, and our friendship developed quickly as we got to know each other and found more and more similarities between us. That has been my experience with many of my disabled friends, that when we find each other, things just kind of click right away. It's like meeting someone and not having to explain to them all of your backstory for them to understand where you are now. If you haven't had that experience yet, I hope that this podcast community can help you find your people. Our Patreon is free to join, and there's an amazing little community forming. We'd really love to have you as a part of it. The link will be in the show notes, or you can search YA Disability Chronicles on Patreon. Thank you so much to our current Patreons, both free and paid, for your support. So now that I've gone on an ADHD tangent, which we have episodes coming up about that, don't worry, let's get down to it. Depression. What is it? You may be thinking that it's sadness, that it's grief, that it's utter exhaustion. It can be all of those things and many more. You may be thinking it's just the blues, it's not a big deal. If you're in the latter camp, buckle up, my friend, because there's a lot to learn. Even if you are someone who has struggled with depression for a long time, I hope that we'll be able to provide some new facts and perspectives. Deep cuts, if you will, but the music kind, not the self-harm kind, of course. We do not condone that. The Johns Hopkins medical definition of depression reads as follows. Depression is a whole body illness. It involves the body, mood, and thoughts. Depression affects the way you eat and sleep. It also can affect the way you feel about yourself and other things. It is not the same as being unhappy or in a blue mood. It is not a sign of personal weakness or a condition that can be willed or wished away. When you have depression, you cannot pull yourself together and get better. Treatment is often needed and many times crucial to recovery. Depression has different forms, just like many other illnesses. 3 of the most common types of depressive disorders are 1. Major depression. This is a mixture of symptoms that affect your ability to work, sleep, eat, and enjoy life. This can put you out of action for a while. These episodes of depression can happen once, twice, or several times in a lifetime. The second form is dysthymia. This is a long-term, ongoing depressed mood, and other symptoms that are not as severe or extensive as those in major depression. These symptoms can still keep you from functioning at full steam or from feeling good. Sometimes people with dysthymia also experience major depressive episodes. The third type is bipolar disorder, a chronic recurring condition that includes cycles of extreme lows or depression and extreme highs called hypomania or mania. We discussed bipolar in episode 1. Today we will be discussing the first type of diagnosis listed, major depressive disorder, as it is the most common and often coincides with other disabilities. Multiple disabilities that interact with each other are called comorbidities, which is a vocab word to stick in your noodle because it will come up quite a bit. The symptoms of major depression are as follows. Keep in mind, each person may experience symptoms differently and may experience many combinations of these symptoms. So, that being said, symptoms include lasting sad, anxious, or empty mood, weight and/or appetite changes due to eating too much or eating too little, changes in sleeping patterns such as having fitful sleep, the inability to sleep, early morning awakening, or sleeping too much, loss of interest and pleasure in activities formerly enjoyed, including sex. We'll expand on that in a further episode. Increased restlessness and/or irritability, decreased energy, fatigue, being slowed down, feeling of worthlessness and/or helplessness, lasting feelings of hopelessness, feelings of inappropriate guilt, not being able to concentrate, think, and/or make decisions, frequent thoughts of death or suicide, wishing to die, or attempting suicide. Please note, people with this symptom should get treatment right away. If you are thinking about killing yourself, turn off this podcast and call 911. Please. Please, please, please. Okay, if you're not currently suicidal, let's keep going. It can also include physical symptoms such as headaches, digestive problems, and/or chronic pain that don't get better with treatment. That's a pretty intense list, right? I know I find it overwhelming, and that's just from reading the list. Not to mention the intense depressive episode that I am personally experiencing right now. A common misunderstanding is that depression does not include any physical symptoms or that it is something that can be willed away. Without treatment, symptoms can last for weeks, months, or even years. Appropriate treatment, however, can help most people who suffer from depression, even in extreme cases. If you are experiencing these symptoms, there are ways to get help. I have some even better news for you. The help can actually work. And you yourself can significantly impact your healing journey. In fact, maybe unfortunately, you will find that you have to. Recovering from depressive episodes is hard work. And that's not something I'm going to sugarcoat. In fact, you can trust me to be straight up with you about absolutely everything in this podcast. Living with disabilities is hard. Maybe that's what brought you to this podcast. If it is, I'm glad, and believe me when I tell you that you can and do put the work in, your life will improve. So that being said, how do you treat depression? There are a variety of ways, and often they need to be used in combination with each other. It's a bitch, right? So, first of all, medication is often a place to start. Even if you don't plan to stay on it long term, I know there's a big stigma against medication, but a lot of people are on it. It's really not a bad thing to treat your noggin the way that it needs to be treated. So beginning with medication can be a really good place to start, just so that you can begin to function more normally and then take further steps to help yourself. There are a lot of different drugs available. There are many different types of antidepressants, and depending on your specific symptoms, that will likely change what medications you are prescribed. So we're not going to go super far in detail with that. But one thing to note is that with a lot of antidepressants, it can take 4 to 6 weeks to feel the full effects of the medication. It's really important to keep taking the medicine, even if it doesn't feel like it's working at first, because it takes time to reach the level that it needs to get to in your system for it to be effective in changing your brain chemistry. And that's something that can be really difficult at first, because it's like you get your medication, you start taking it, you want it to help, and it's likely going to take 6 weeks before it helps. And that's something that just fucking sucks, but it is what it is. And the other thing that is really probably going to be even more beneficial is psychotherapy. This is most often cognitive, behavioral, and/or interpersonal therapy. There are so many different forms of interpersonal therapy that you can absolutely find the right one for you. Therapy focuses on changing the distorted views you have of yourself and your environment. It helps you work to improve your interpersonal relationship skills and how to identify and manage stressors in your life. There are so many forms of psychotherapy we'll discuss in later episodes, and so many coping skills you can learn so that you can help yourself to feel better, even when things feel really hopeless. Finding a therapist who's a good fit for you is one of the very most important things, and it can take time. It took me a long time to find the therapist I work with now, but I eventually found the perfect fit, and we meet every week. Honestly, I don't know what I would do without my therapist. Do not give up the search for the right therapist, because when you find them, your life can change dramatically for the better if you're willing to put the work in. Psychologytoday.com is a good place to start looking for providers in your area, because you're able to search by zip code and by specialty. And openpathcollective.com is also a very good resource, and it's an amazing alternative for people who are uninsured or who are under the poverty line. I will link to both websites in the show notes. They're both really great resources if you're looking for a therapist or a psychiatrist. The combination of medication and therapy is very effective in treating depression in most cases. You may need to receive a formal diagnosis as a part of seeking treatment, so how do you do that? Luckily, depression is a common mental health disorder which can be diagnosed by most primary care doctors or by a psychiatrist, a doctor who specializes in mental health disorders, who may be needed to help with medication management in more severe cases. Ideally, if you're working with a psychiatrist, they will stay in touch with your doctor and therapist to coordinate your care as a team. This is not something you can count on, though. You will have to follow up and advocate for your needs. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. You'll have to do it a lot. Speak up about your symptoms, and if doctors aren't listening, keep repeating yourself until they do. Depression is diagnosed twice as frequently as Speak up about your symptoms, and if doctors aren't listening, keep repeating yourself. Depression is diagnosed twice as frequently in women as in men, and the medical field is designed to treat diseases the way that they impact men, because historically, that is the most data that has been collected. Pour me a cup from the bottle of misogyny, anyone? Cheers to that. Other disabilities can also be missed because the doctor writes off other medical diagnoses as just depression in women rather than looking further. The opposite is true in men, where depression is overlooked and they're told to just kind of stuff it down. It's wildly underdiagnosed in men and overdiagnosed in women. Societally, men have, up until now, really been taught to not speak up about depression, whereas women have been taught that if anything's wrong with you, it's probably depression. And there's a lot of history there that we'll get into. I'm going to do an episode on the history of disability, and so that you'll get a lot more information about that coming up. If you feel that you're suffering from depression and you've not been diagnosed or received treatment, reach out to your doctor about your symptoms. Society invalidates many of these symptoms as things that shouldn't be taken seriously. You'll hear all about my thoughts on the word should and how it should never be fucking used in future episodes, but that's incorrect that it should not be taken seriously. Depression impacts many aspects, and treatment can greatly improve quality of life. I can say that from experience, not just from research. Now we are reaching the end of this stop on our Disability 101 journey. I hope that I've been able to open your eyes or teach you something new about depression in the context of disability today. Coming up in Disability 101, we will be covering chronic pain, which is a common comorbidity with depression. Quick quiz! Do you remember what that word means? Good job! It's experiencing multiple disabilities that interact with each other. We'll also be talking about the use of mobility aids, and Hannah and I will be discussing chronic migraines as you get to know her better. Don't forget to follow us on your preferred podcast platform so that you get notified about new episodes. Thanks for spending time with us today and putting another stamp on your passport of disability knowledge. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you left us a comment or review. It really does help other people find the podcast. A huge thank you to our behind-the-scenes team and to our patrons. Join our Patreon for free to keep up with all of our shenanigans. If something in this podcast resonated with you, or you have a question or would like to be interviewed on the pod, please drop us a line at yadisabilitychronicles@gmail.com. This is your co-host Meg signing off. Remember, please be kind today and every day.